Jean-Antoine Watteau, better known as Antoine Watteau, was a French painter whose brief career spurred the revival of interest in color and movement as seen in the tradition of Correggio and Rubens. He revitalized the waning Baroque style, shifting it to the less severe, more naturalistic, less formally classical Rococo. Watteau is credited with inventing the genre of fêtes, galantes, scenes of bucolic and idyllic charm, suffused with a theatrical air. Some of his best-known subjects were drawn from the world of Italian comedy and ballet. Early life and training. Watteau was born in October 1684 in the town of Valenciennes, which had recently passed from the Spanish Netherlands to France. His father, Jean-Philippe Watteau, was a roofer given to brawling. Showing an early interest in painting, Jean-Antoine may have been apprenticed to Jacques-Albert Guérin, a local painter. Jean-Antoine's first artistic subjects were charlatans selling quack remedies on the streets of Valenciennes. Watteau left for Paris in 1702. There he found employment in a workshop at Pont Notre Dame, making copies of popular genre paintings in the Flemish and Dutch tradition. It was in the period that he developed his characteristic sketch-like technique. By 1705 he was employed as an assistant by the painter Claude Guillet, whose work represented a reaction against the turgid official art of Louis XIV's reign. In Guillet's studio, Watteau became acquainted with the characters of the Commedia dell'arte, a favorite subject of Guillet's that would become one of Watteau's lifelong passions. Afterward he moved to the workshop of Claude Audran III, an interior decorator, under whose influence he began to make drawings made for the consummate elegance. Audran was the curator of the Palais du Luxembourg, where Watteau was able to see the magnificent series of canvases painted by Peter Paul Rubens for Queen Marie de Medici. The Flemish painter would become one of his major influences. Together with the Venetian masters he would later study in the collection of his patron and friend, the banker Pierre Crozat. Later career. In 1709 Watteau tried to obtain the Prix de Rome and was rejected by the Academy. In 1712 he tried again and was considered so good that, rather than receiving the one-year stay in Rome for which he had applied, he was accepted as a full member of the Academy. He took 5 years to deliver the required reception piece, but it was one of his masterpieces. The Pilgrimage to Cythera, also called the Embarkation for Cythera. Watteau lacked aristocratic patrons. His buyers were bourgeois such as bankers and dealers. Among his most famous paintings, beside the 2 versions of The Pilgrimage to Cythera, are Piero, Fêtes Venetienne, Love in the Italian Theatre, Love in the French Theatre, Verlez-vous triomphe des Belles, a mezzotint. The subject of his hallmark painting, Piero, is an actor in a white satin costume who stands isolated from his 4 companions, staring ahead with an enigmatic expression on his face. Watteau's final masterpiece, the shop sign of Gare Saint, exits the pastoral forest locale for a mundane urban set of encounters, painted at Watteau's own insistence, in 8 days, working only in the mornings, in order to warm up his fingers. This sign for the shop in Paris of the paintings de l'Edme François Gare Saint is effectively the final curtain of Watteau's theatre. It has been compared with Las Meninas as a meditation on art and illusion. The scene is an art gallery where the facade has magically vanished, and the gallery and street in the canvas are fused into one contiguous drama. Watteau alarmed his friends by a carelessness about his future and financial security, as if foreseeing he would not live for long. In fact, he had been sickly and physically fragile since childhood. In 1720, he traveled to London, England, to consult Dr. Richard Mead, one of the most fashionable physicians of his time and an admirer of Watteau's work. However, London's damp and smoky air offset any benefits of Dr. Mead's wholesome food and medicines. Watteau returned to France and spent his last few months on the estate of his patron, Abbé Harangue, where he died in 1721, perhaps from tuberculous laryngitis at the age of 36. The abbé said Watteau was semi-conscious and mute during his final days, clutching a paintbrush and painting imaginary paintings in the air. His nephew, Louis-Joseph Watteau, son of Antoine's brother Noel-Joseph Watteau, and grandnephew, François Louis-Joseph Watteau, son of Louis, followed Antoine into painting. Critical assessment and legacy. Little known during his lifetime beyond a small circle of his devotees, Watteau was mentioned but seldom in contemporary art criticism, and then usually reprovingly. Sir Michael Levy once noted that Watteau created unwittingly the concept of the individualistic artist loyal to himself, and himself alone. If his immediate followers would depict the unabashed frillery of aristocratic romantic pursuits, Watteau in a few masterpieces anticipates an art about art, the world of art as seen through the eyes of an artist, in contrast to the Rococo whimsicality and licentiousness cultivated by Boucher and Fragonard in the later part of Louis XV's reign. Watteau's theatrical panache is usually tinged with a note of sympathy, wistfulness, and sadness at the transience of love and other earthly delights. Watteau was a prolific draftsman. His drawings, typically executed in trois crayons technique, were collected and admired even by those, such as Saint, who found fault with his paintings. In 1726 and 1728, Jean de Julien published suites of etchings after Watteau's drawings, and in 1735 he published a series of engravings after his paintings. The Recueil Julien, the quality of the reproductions, using a mixture of engraving and etching following the practice of the Rubens engravers, varied according to the skill of the people employed by Julien, but was often very high. Such a comprehensive record was hitherto unparalleled. This helped disseminate his influence round Europe and into the decorative arts. Watteau's influence on the arts was more extensive than that of almost any other 18th-century artist. The Watteau dress, a long, sack-like dress with loose pleats hanging from the shoulder at the back, similar to those worn by many of the women in his paintings, is named after him. According to the 1911 Britannica, in his treatment of the landscape background and of the atmospheric surroundings of the figures can be found the germs of Impressionism. His influence on later generations of painters may have been less apparent in France than in England, where J.M.W. Turner was among his admirers. A revived vogue for Watteau began in England during the British Regency, and was later encapsulated by the Goncourt brothers in the world of art. In 1984, Watteau societies were created in Paris by Jean Ferret, and London by Dr. Selby Whittingham. A major exhibition in Paris, Washington and Berlin commemorated the centenary of his birth in 1984. Since 2000, a Watteau Center has been established at Valenciennes by Professor Chris Rousseau. A catalogue of his drawings has been compiled by Pierre Rosenberg, replacing the one by Sir Carl Parker, and Alan Wintermute is preparing one for his paintings. Gallery.